Let's go to Congressman Estes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our panelists here today. You know, in the past, we've worked in bipartisan manner to pass legislation that combated some of the serious issue dealing with forced labor. In 2016, the committee took the crucial step to ban imported goods made with forced labor through the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act. And in 2018, with passage USMCA, we did a lot to help from America's standpoint on combating forced labor. But the problem with slave labor still exists, and in some cases it seems to be growing. The reality is in that many industries across the globe, forced labor is used in some way or another, whether it's agriculture, textiles, or even manufactured goods. Odds are that the supply chain's been corrupted with the practice in some way. The Department of Labor keeps a list of countries believed to produce goods through child labor, and as of last month, it included 77 countries and 156 different goods. There's far too few countries around the globe that are working to halt forced labor and making that a priority. And with our modern supply chains being so complex and non-transparent, it's extremely difficult for authorities and consumers to know whether a good's been produced through criminal labor. But as the leading consuming country in the world, we need to take an active stance and hold the bad actors responsible. We can't turn a blind eye to certain repeat offenders just because they're part of a large trading nation. For example, evidence shows that the Chinese Communist Party now operates large-scale state-sponsored programs of forced relocation and labor for certain ethnic minority groups. It appears that when the Chinese communists deem problematic people, they're being transferred into factories across China, meaning most of the largest supplier of garments and other manufacturing goods at risk of being used forced labor. It's time to make clear to the Communist Chinese Party that they can no longer profit off of an economic system that monetizes some of the most egregious rights violations in the world. In light of some of these severe abuses from China, I think it's questionable should they even be rewarded hosting a major international event like the Olympics in 2022. Particularly when it's clear that they don't show any sign of stopping those horrendous rights abuses. Recently, some notable U.S. companies have performed audits on their supply chain, and in some cases, subsequently removed and changed locations that had been found to be using criminal labor practices. I think efforts like this should be applauded and encouraged. Companies refusing to source products from any region or country known to use forced labor will go a long way towards removing the blight of forced labor from the global economy. Mr. Lowry, can you talk a little bit about some of the specific activities that the U.S. can do working with U.S. companies to ensure that the supply chain is free of criminal labor activity?
Sorry, Congressman, I had myself on mute. My apologies for that. Well, I think the proposal that we put forward in our written submission, as well as what I outlined in my testimony, is one such step that the U.S. could take, and that is to involve business earlier in the WRO process. Oftentimes, when the WRO is issued, business doesn't find out until hours before it is issued and it's about to hit the port.
At AG, but he is back.
And there's a lack of visibility. And the importer's goods are already at the port or they're already on the water by the time we become aware of that. And so business gets faced with a limited opportunity here to either re-export the shipment once it arrives or provide proof to get the shipment released and entered into U.S. commerce. If companies had more notice, they could, for example, stop payment, cancel the order, and use the power of the purse, which we've heard so much about today, to effectuate that change. When a company is left with no options for goods they have paid for and cannot import, companies will stop working with the supplier and cut and run, versus pressuring their suppliers to be a good actor in a bad neighborhood. And so I think some process improvements where you could engage the business community at an earlier stage would give them the opportunity to address situations with suppliers to eradicate some of these forms of forced labor that are so difficult to get at because of where they're occurring in the supply chain.
Oh, that's great. With some of the technology advances that our Customs and Border Patrol has today, hopefully that can some of those good ideas can be implemented throughout the shipping process. So I appreciate the hearing we're having today, Mr. Chairman, and It's a very important topic, and I'll yield back the remainder of my time.